Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Fran, and today I would like to do the second part on Neville Goddard's From Theory to Practice by telling you about how I manifested my lovebird back 4 times in a row. Now, let me be clear, I am talking about an actual bird here, but the principles apply equally to people or parrots. In fact, it might be quite a bit harder by classical standards to manifest a real bird back into your life once it has flown away. After all, it doesn't have a mobile phone, social media, GPS, or even a post box. Yet, it often feels harder to manifest a person into your life. So why is that? The only reason is because we have a story attached to that person. It's usually not a very positive story. So we have resistance. And we find it hard to let go of the old story or the old narrative attached to that person. And that's the actual reason why they moved away from us. Whereas with a bird, it's usually we don't have a complicated story attached to them. It's just a pet. And although when you think about it, it's obviously much harder to manifest that bird back into your life, as we said, once it has flown away. And yet I did it 4 times. Once after 24 hours of her flying away and once after 36 hours, roughly. So stay tuned to hear what I did and how easy it is to apply the very same principles to anything you desire in your life. And I mean literally anything. And it's easier than you think. So my brother got this lovebird for my nephews and niece. And they don't like to keep it in a cage, so they let her out. She's female, so I will refer to it as a she. And for out, I mean inside the house. Now, lovebirds probably owe their name to the fact that they are very human friendly and they get so attached to their owners that they're like any other pet. Also, they are not afraid of people, so they will fly on your shoulder and let you pet them. If you call their name, they will either come to you or reply by chirping or shrieking or making a noise. Now, ours is called Keisha. Apparently not after the pop singer, as my nephews and niece don't even know who the pop singer is. The name was completely casual. In any case, Keisha likes to stay perched on my shoulder and she plays with my necklace, which I cannot bear as she tickles my neck with her tiny feet and beak. Now, several months ago, my niece and brother came into the house and my niece was a mess. She was sobbing uncontrollably and she could hardly speak. "Auntie," she said, "Keisha is flown away. We've lost Keisha." Now, I had been teaching my niece about the law of attraction or assumption, or whatever you want to call it. In fact, we call it the law of Bruno, but I will explain why later. So I told her, "No, we haven't lost Keisha. She's just gone for an excursion. She's on her way back right now. In fact, she's already here." She looked at me as if I'd lost my marbles. So I asked her, "Remember, what would Bruno say?" But she was still puzzled and perhaps she thought I had bigger problems than a missing lovebird. So I told her the law of Bruno, remember? She looked visibly relieved, although she still thought I was a sandwich short of a picnic. But I remained calm and unaffected and assured her that the bird was on her way back. So we went upstairs to the attic terrace and I told her to stop crying because that would just send the wrong message out. "Would you be crying if Keisha were here right now?" "Of course not, Auntie," she said, and tried to calm down as best she could. Now, my niece is quite accustomed to my weirdness and unusual methods, so not much phases her. She's grown used to having an open mind when it comes to me. So she humored me. I told her to call the bird, so she did, once. Nothing. I said, "That's okay. She's probably trying to trace your voice. Try again." And she did. And here comes Keisha from the neighbor's roof right on top of my niece's head. I cannot tell you the look of surprise on my niece's face. The next time it happened, she was gone for over 24 hours, and this time the chances to find her alive by classical standards were pretty slim. My niece was mentioning all the dangerous situations she could have gotten into. I mean, Auntie, there are cats and dogs everywhere. There are magpies and bigger bears. She cannot feed herself or drink. And even if someone finds her, they probably won't give her back. They might keep her in a cage all day, and so on and so forth. So I said to my niece, okay, please stop right now. Remember the law of Bruno. This is how the story goes. Keisha is a very, very smart bird. After all, she's learned how to open the cage on her own. She can fly, which cats and dogs cannot do, and she's afraid of them, so she's likely to stay away from them. People in the village will look after her and will probably want to find the owner, as it is a very small village and everyone knows everything about everyone. She's probably enjoying herself, flying around, exploring the parks, and she will come back when she's hungry. But, she interjected, Auntie, lovebirds have a very poor sense of direction. How will she find us? So I replied, look, I have no idea exactly how she will find us, but you don't have to worry about the how. All you need to do is to know that she's back. So to take her mind off it, I suggested we go for a walk, since she would not stop crying and she hadn't eaten all day and she now had a headache. While we were walking, I told her to imagine what she would feel like if Nana called her and told her that Keisha was back home safe and sound. And as she did so, she told me that in that moment she imagined that phone call, her headache had gone. And that is when I knew that we'd done it. She had shifted reality in her imagination. But to be on the safe side, I went into the state of the wish fulfilled by feeling Keisha's feet tickling my neck and shoulders. I heard a shriek in my ear and I felt a soft feather under my fingers. Then I told my niece that she had to let go of her wish, that maybe Keisha was happier being free, or maybe she had found new friends or a new family. And if she really loved the bird, she had to wish her well. And my niece said that she only wanted to know that she was safe, that it didn't matter if she never came back, as long as she knew she was okay. An hour later, my mother called us to let us know that Keisha was back home. She had put a message on her Facebook timeline, and the person who had found the lovebird replied and returned her to my mother. Now I could see my niece thinking, now there really is something to this law of Bruno. Now this happened 2 more times until I intended the bird doesn't fly away anymore, and she's been with us ever since. She actually stopped opening the cage, and once she opened the cage and got out of the cage and then got onto the window and knocked on the window with her beak so we could let her into the house. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. The whole thing was hilarious. Now, your rational mind could argue a million different things, like you found her because of social media. Lovebirds don't fly away too far, and you live in a small village, or you got lucky. But first of all, in our 3D, things will happen in a way that will make rational sense to you. The bird will have to get back somehow. It won't just materialize out of thin air. So, of course, it will come back through the usual familiar channels. The law of assumption works like magic, but it appears natural and normal. This is what Neville Goddard called the bridge of incidents. In other words, a series of circumstances which will interact to bring about the desired outcome. And as for luck, well, if you believe in luck, coincidences, and pure chance, then you might as well believe in the law of assumption. At least the latter has some sort of scientific justification behind it. I mean, we are so used to talking about luck that we think it's a real thing, though no one can explain or justify it in any way. Yet we accept it uncritically. But why? Why is it so easy for us to accept that we are powerless and that life simply happens to us? Perhaps because in this way, we don't have to take responsibility for the unwanted stuff that shows up in our reality. But here's the thing. Once you understand that you really create everything in your physical world, then there is no point in wasting time and energy in trying to figure out how and why you manifested something unwanted in your life, since, well, you're in charge and therefore you can unmanifest it at any point. You can recreate your life at any point simply by letting go of your old story, your old narrative, and recreating a brand new one. Your current reality only tells you where you're at right now, or even where you were a while back, since our 3D shows us our past imaginal acts. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, chances are that you are dealing with more than a lost pet right now. You're probably facing some big challenges in your life. I mean, it might not necessarily be so, but most of us who stumble upon the law of assumption don't really stumble upon it. We've usually been through some sort of hardship, and when everything else fails to resolve our issues, we find these teachings. So when we are dealing with unwanted stuff materializing in our lives, when we are hurt or angry or disillusioned by life or by people in our lives, the last thing that we want to do is believe that we create everything that we experience in our physical world, including how people behave towards us. I get it. Believe me. The notion that I had created some people's behavior and despicable actions towards me made me unbelievably angry when I first started looking into the law of assumption. So I understand all too well the feeling of frustration and disbelief that you might feel right now. Yet, when you get past this habit that we all have to some extent to punish yourself or bash yourself, you see that on the other side of accepting responsibility for where you are right now, there is total freedom to manifest or experience everything you've ever wished for in your life. And I mean everything, not just what you've been told that was possible for you, but anything that you wish for and desire. So please, forget about how and why you manifested these things in your reality. You probably had to experience those as a way to get to these teachings so that you could learn to live a more joyful, fulfilled, successful life. I mean, think about it. If you hadn't experienced some form of lack of hardship in your life, you wouldn't be here looking for answers. And you could have carried on living a very flat, mediocre life, immersed in everyday routine, living in autopilot, never getting off the hamster wheel or out of the golden cage, to speak Keisha's language. But whatever brought you here has already fulfilled its purpose, and it really doesn't need to go any further. You can change any circumstance in your life simply by changing your inner dialogue, the story you keep telling yourself and others. I say simply, but that doesn't mean that it's easy at the beginning. Like everything in this 3D reality, it takes some practice and reiteration before the skill becomes automatic. At first, you will naturally want to revert back to your familiar story because that's what we know and what feels comfortable, even if it's hurting us. The unknown always feels uncomfortable until it becomes known and familiar. It's like when you start a new diet or exercise regime or learn any new skills. At first, it will feel weird, painful, or even pointless. But you have to keep going in spite of the lack of evidence that what you are doing is working. Well, in reality, the evidence is there all along, but you cannot see it yet. Your rational mind will take a little while to catch up. Now, I will tell you why I refer to the law of assumption as the law or law of attraction, or whatever you usually call it, as the law of Bruno. And no, again, it doesn't have anything to do with the singer Bruno Mars, although now that I think about it, it probably should. I've just had this realization. Bruno Mars works with the law of assumption, whether he knows it or not. I mean, remember one of his first singles? It was, I Want to Be a Billionaire. Well, guess what? He now is one. And thinking about Keisha, the pop singer, do you know the meaning of her stage name? Apparently, she was a struggling artist, and in the attempt to manifest financial abundance, she called herself Keisha after cash, and with a dollar sign in place of the S. And again, guess what? She's now rich and famous. But here's how I came up with his name, the Law of Bruno. Bruno is this older man I met last summer while on holiday. He's a very successful retired businessman who lives an incredible life. He looks about 20 years younger than his actual age and is very playful. He has a great sense of humor, a fantastic family, anything anyone could ever desire. One evening, we were playing cards with a group of friends, and it was Bruno's turn to pick a card. And just before he picked, he said these words out loud. All I need right now is to pick a 7 of spades. That will fit in perfectly in my straight flush, and I win the game. Now, first of all, anyone else would have looked at the situation as follows. Only one card out of the whole stack would allow me to win this game. I have little or no chance of winning. That would have been the rational, statistically sound response to the cards they had been dealt. Also, the fact that he said it out loud meant that he really believed he was going to pick that card. Otherwise, it would have spoiled the game because now people knew what he needed, and they wouldn't have discarded that 7 of spades if they did have it. Instead, his view of the game was, if I pick this one card, I win, period. So I'm going to pick it. Of course, he wasn't bothered about winning. He was just simply playing for the fun of it, to pass some time and have a laugh. He would have enjoyed the game just as much had he not won. Yet, he picked the card and, you guessed it, it was a 7 of spades. Since I had been studying and practicing the law of assumption for some time, it should have come as no surprise that that card had come up in spite of the odds, and yet it did. I was in shock because even when you understand the principles behind it and how it works, it's still surprising to see it manifesting and showing up in your physical reality. At first, it may even scare you to the point that sometimes people get frightened by their success and start self-sabotaging. I know that is exactly what happened to me, because this is not what we've been taught about how reality works and how the physical world works. All our lives, we have been told that physical reality is real and that your imagination is nothing, that you can only affect the physical reality through hard work, effort, struggle, by pushing yourself, by doing stuff, through external action. Now, this is all being reversed. You're being told that you were looking at life upside down all these years. And you're meant to just accept it. Of course, you're going to fight this concept at first. Now, this reminds me of an experiment by Professor Theodor Erisman. Professor Erisman made Kohler, one of his students at the University of Innsbruck, wear a pair of hand-engineered goggles. Inside the goggles, specially arranged mirrors flicked the light that would reach Kohler's retina, top becoming bottom and bottom becoming top. In other words, he would see the world upside down, literally. At first, Kohler was stumbling when trying to negotiate objects in his upside down world. For instance, he would turn a cup downwards when someone was pouring water into it, as he would see the water flowing upwards. But over the next week, Kohler found himself adapting, first in fits and starts. However, after 10 days, he had so adjusted to the new version of reality that everything in his head had turned the right way up. He would see a normal world, in spite of the goggles. Now, when the experiment was finished and he removed the upside-down goggles, guess what? He now saw a world upside down, and he had to retrain himself to see the world the right side up. This experiment exemplifies perfectly not just the illusory nature of reality and the fact that the world we experience is not out there, but inside our mind. Furthermore, it shows how when you're used to seeing reality in a certain way, and you've seen reality in that way for your entire life or for a long period of time, then it will take your mind some time to adjust to the new vision. It took Kohler just 10 days to view the world the right side up. But remember, he never took his goggles off during the 10 days. When we are trying to retrain our subconscious mind, we don't have any physical tools at our disposal. No goggles, so to speak. I mean, we can use subliminal recordings, hypnosis, meditation, affirmation, revision, self-concept work, but you might practice them for half an hour or an hour a day tops. Then your mind will naturally revert back to your familiar ways during the remainder of the day. Hence why it might take longer than 10 days in order to see tangible changes in your physical reality. If only there were goggles to retrain our subconscious mind. However, the stories you tell yourself day in, day out, your inner and outer dialogue, your dominant emotional state, they are all goggle-like tools. They are the filter through which you view and experience your life. So if your life feels upside down right now, it's simply because you are wearing special goggles. You might not be aware of it, but you are. Those goggles are your subconscious programming. And there is only one way to flip the life that you are experiencing right now on its head. And it's by removing the goggles of your limiting beliefs. Sure, at first it will feel extremely uncomfortable and unfamiliar. It might even feel scary. But if you stick with it day in, day out, eventually you will start experiencing the 3D the right way up. And it doesn't matter what label you put on it, what you call it, the law of attraction, the law of assumption, the law of Bruno, science, religion, superstition, whatever story you tell yourself over and over again, you will experience out there in the real world. You don't need to know how this is achieved. And you certainly don't need to know how and why you have manifested the unwanted stuff that you've manifested in your life so far. All you need to know is that now that you have this knowledge, you can change your life in ways that you thought would never be possible. And as I always say, you really shouldn't take my word or anyone's word for it. Do the work. Change your inner and outer narrative and see what happens. See what shows up in your life. And if you believe that this stuff is all way too new agey for you, then think again. Plato, the ancient Greece philosopher, hence why I named my channel after his famous allegory, effectively denied that the physical world is real at all, and argued that the physical objects that we perceive, and I'm quoting Deutsch here, are merely shadows or imperfect imitations of their ideal essence, forms or ideas which exist in a separate realm that is true reality. But when people think of philosophers, they usually think of airheads or dreamers or poets even. Philosophy is laughed at today, but first of all, these were the scientists of the day in ancient Greece. Secondly, they were much more knowledgeable than today's scientists, as they arrived at their conclusions simply by the power of argument. They didn't have any of the modern tools of inquiry, they didn't have any technology, and yet they reached the same conclusions that our modern quantum physicists arrived at. Well, at least the ones who are brave enough to look behind the illusion of form and actually describe what happens at the quantum level. But I digress. Let's go back to Plato. He was concerned with abstract concepts in maths, such as pure numbers, 1, 2, 3, etc. Where do these concepts come from? According to Plato, they come from a world which contains the actual forms these abstract concepts refer to. This reality contains the forms of all abstract concepts. For instance, it contained the form of a perfect circle. You see, what we experience in this earthly realm is never a perfect circle. It's never perfectly round or perfectly planar, etc., etc. But why am I boring you with ancient philosophy? Because Plato asks a critical question. Given all this earthly imperfection and given our even more imperfect and limited sensory access even to this earthly form, how can we possibly know what we know about real perfect circles? Now, before I give you Plato's answer to this query, let me remind you of how Einstein achieved his theory of relativity, given he was a mediocre mathematician by expert mathematician standards. He didn't find the equations. First, he used thought experiments, pretty much like Plato would have done. Then, through the power of argument, he realized that Newton's vision of reality was an approximation. He was describing the world not as it really was, but as it appeared to be on the large scale. Then and only then, he sought the assistance of expert mathematicians in order to justify his assumptions. That is why he was quoted as saying that imagination is more important or more fundamental than knowledge. You see, through knowledge, you can only ever know what is already known. You can never discover anything new. So let's go back to Plato and his question of where this knowledge comes from, of these perfect entities which we do not ever experience on earth. He concluded that if we do not obtain the knowledge of such things from our physical illusory reality, then we must obtain it directly from the real world, the world of form itself. According to Plato, we have a perfect inborn knowledge of that world, which is, according to Plato again, forgotten at birth, and then obscured by layers of errors, caused by trusting our senses. But, and here comes the good part and the reason for this long digression, Plato argues that reality can be remembered through the diligent application of reason, which then yields the absolute certainty that experience can never provide. Now, although Deutsch doesn't completely agree with this conclusion, Einstein's solution to his scientific queries frequently came not from scientific rigor and observation of external reality, but rather through dreams. In dreams, our rational mind is asleep and our subconscious mind awakens or remembers the real world of form, to use Plato's words. And even David Deutsch agrees with the fact that the question posed by Plato needs addressing. Where does the knowledge of abstract entities such as mathematical concepts come from? Since it cannot come from direct experience, where does mathematical intuition come from? Nowadays, mathematical proof confers absolute certainty to a scientific theory. It's therefore accepted universally and uncritically. But it has the exact same role as Plato's memories of the realm of form. As maths become more and more complex and abstract, mathematicians themselves cannot agree on what is considered to be truth or imagination. To resolve this issue, Dutch mathematician L.E.J. Brouwer advocates an extreme conservative strategy for proof theory, intuitionism, which at the core involves denying the existence of what lies outside, denying the existence of the physical world. So the reason I have embarked in this long digression about philosophy, quantum physics, and maths is to point out the obvious fact that the deeper you delve into the 3D physical reality that we experience through our five senses, the more dreamlike it appears. The reason that so many of us are not satisfied and are looking for a more purposeful life is because we feel trapped in a dream in which even free will is an illusion. The reason that many are looking into the law of assumption is that their dream has become unbearable and, like Keisha, the Lovebird, they want to break free. This is why you should be grateful to your unpleasant circumstances, because Without them, you would never have had the urge to wake up and to really start living and creating a life worth living. And just like when you wake up from a very realistic dream, at first you experience a moment of confusion as your reality readjusts to the world of form and realizes it was trapped in an illusion all along, as your identity remembers who it is. So if you are listening to this podcast, it's very likely that you are trying to wake up from an unpleasant dream and you are in the process of remembering who you really are. So this is it for today. I intend that this content helps you wake up from the illusion of reality and come into your own power. If you've come this far and found this content helpful, please remember to share, like, and subscribe. In any case, thank you for listening. Have a wonderful, awakened day.